All right. Hello, everybody out there, and welcome to this week's HackSurfer Hangout. Today, we're going to be talking to Peter Long. He's the CEO of a company formerly known as Lockbox. Apologies, I forgot to ask how you pronounce the company. Can you let us know, Peter?
Okay. Yes. Hi, everybody. Peter here. Yeah, I mean, we originally called the company Lockbox, and it was kind of a cool name when we first started, but so many people have come and liked the idea of box. It's kind of a little confusing out there because various other companies called box. We decided to strike out and kind of find a new identity. So we settled on the name ARKpX. Ark as in being kind of a safe place to store stuff. A nice repository of important information you want to keep. And then PX stands for private exchange. So it's about how to exchange stuff between different groups of people, but maintain privacy while we're doing that. So the company name is called ARKpX.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess, like you said, there's a lot of different vendors kind of out there in sort of the cloud space and the file sharing space and things like that. Can you just kind of maybe give us a sort of high-level overview of maybe the company and kind of where it fits into there, and then sort of your background and what you do?
Sure, Jeff, that'd be great. We kind of looked at the cloud space back when it was first starting to form and people started to use the cloud for sharing information, and we recognized there was kind of actually interesting problem to be solved. Sharing in the cloud is very straightforward. There's just hundreds and hundreds of different ways to use the cloud. Well-known things like Apple iCloud, Dropbox, those kind of folks who really facilitate sharing. The other axis that we looked at was the privacy axis. If I want to keep my stuff private, what do I do? I can lock down my laptop, I can run TrueCrypt, and although that's kind of in an interesting phase right now, I can kind of lock down the machine and go, okay, no one can access it. But business is about sharing, and so the problem we were trying to solve was how do you share stuff but keep the privacy? How do you keep other people out? How do you keep the service provider from looking at your stuff, governments from looking at your stuff? How do you maintain privacy while you're sharing? So that's kind of the space that we kind of decided it would be interesting to go look after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it's sort of an area that's really, I guess in my mind, just sort of growing at the moment. Is there anything you really attributed to that? Is it just sort of the growth in mobile and bring your own device and that kind of thing, or is there other reasons that people are having trouble with that?
I think there's a number of reasons why people have become more interested in privacy. We can't ignore the Snowden effect. I mean, that has certainly put privacy on the front page of, and really made people start to think about, well, who does get access to my data? But having said that, people also go, well, it's pictures of my dog and stuff like that. I don't really care who's looking at those things. But what we find is that, in the business situations, and particularly when you're dealing with countries outside of the US, there's an increased awareness of privacy and how do you kind of keep your stuff away from prying eyes. The other aspect that you rightly pointed out was mobile devices. Increasingly, people are walking around with iPads, iPhones, Android phones, whatever, and the stuff on there that people really don't want to lose, right? I mean, it has banking details, it has all kinds of stuff, and so these can be left in taxis, in bars, and whatever. So the other aspect of how do you keep my stuff private, if I lose my phone. So I think all of these things are coming together kind of to raise the profile of privacy, probably more than it's ever done before.
Yeah, I saw a study probably a month or two back just kind of talking about how, Edward Snowden and basically the increased awareness that people were having kind of around privacy and encryption and kind of, things along those lines. I was kind of be interested to get your perspective on if that awareness is actually, translated into, more people sort of actually doing anything about it. Do you kind of run into people, have an issue with wanting to spend the money on that front, or just anything along those lines?
It's really interesting, Jeff. We see completely different reactions depending on where you are in the world. I've had reactions from some of my US clients who kind of feel that it's patriotic that the NSA is looking at their stuff. They feel good about that. And I talk to Canadians who go, don't even think about storing the data in the US. You guys offer us storage in other places? We go, yeah, okay, don't put it in the US. So you get really quite different reactions to, you know, the changed world and this increased sensitivity to privacy. I think businesses are always worried about privacy to some degree, but, you know, like in any security thing, it's tended to be a trade-off. You know, well, we'll invest in this when it becomes a business issue. But again, if you look at what happened to Target and other people like that, you know, again, those events have caused people to kind of worry about, well, what is actually happening to the information that I give to these companies? You know, they promise to look after it. They promise to do their best to not give it to somebody else. But, you know, time and time again, you're finding, you know, well-known, trusted brands are either making mistakes or they're being hacked. And the information that consumers have kind of given these guys under the belief that it was going to be kept private, the belief it was going to be looked after, is being eroded. And so I think all of those things are just generally increasing people's awareness about privacy and what you have to do to kind of almost take back control over your own privacy. Because increasingly, I think people are getting to the conclusion that they can't really trust the people that they formerly trusted with their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to bring that up because I was looking at your website kind of before we started here, and it said on there you're the only provider of absolute privacy and total control for the exchange of documents and data. Sort of like right on the front page there. So I guess my thought is, you know, I don't really know too much about the other sort of competitors in this sphere, but maybe if you want to take a chance to trash talk a little bit and say why you're better, or kind of explain your company a little bit and why you say you're the only provider who kind of has that absolute privacy.
So I think the best way to think about the problem is kind of bringing it back to the physical world. If you think about how I might send something of value to, say I want to send you a present. I've got something of value, I want to send it to you. Traditionally, what I had to do is I put it in a box and I gave it to the courier. And I had to trust that the courier was honorable, didn't have people working in their dispatch that would open the package and see what was inside. Right? Effectively, I had to trust the courier every step of the way, from the guy who picks it up, to the depot, to the storage facility, to the guy who puts it on the plane. Every step of the chain has to be protected. And if you think about that in the digital world, what it means is if you take that approach of protecting the infrastructure, you have to erect secure communication between the client and the server, typically SSL. You have to have, you know, guard dogs armed with AK-47s outside of the data center to make sure no one gets in. You've got to have biometrics. You've got to have trustworthy employees. There's this ongoing series of things you have to do to make sure that, you know, no one actually gets to tamper or access this important, you know, package as I'm sending it through. The alternative, which is the approach we've taken, is to say, look, you know, you can't guarantee that all these people along the chain are going to do their job honestly and reliably every single time. You have to take control. So back to the analogy, what I would do is I would take a box, a locked box, which is kind of where Lockbox came from, and I would put that present in the locked box. I would lock it up, and now I'm going to send it via the courier. So I don't care if the guy leaves it in the warehouse over the weekend or, you know, it's on the back of the truck. It's locked, right? And none of the guys have the key to unlock that box till, Jeff, you get it, and then you can unlock it. So kind of our premise is we want to protect the data itself and then not worry as much about what happens in the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So again, our clients don't even have to trust us. You know, everything we store is encrypted. The clients encrypt it before they even give it to us. Most of the time, we don't even see the client's data because it goes directly from the client into the data store. It doesn't even pass through us. So the approach we've taken is protect the data, not the infrastructure. And as a result, we can make these kind of, I feel like trash talking claims, but I think, you know, we believe in these in the sense that, you know, we can't look at the data, the service provider can't look at the data. The only people who can look at the data are the guys who are participating in the conversation, you know, the guys at the edge. And so that's kind of why we make this claim of absolute privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess what would be a typical customer. You know, a customer comes to you, you know, has some problems. I mean, what kind of problems do they typically have, or what are they trying to, or their top concerns, I guess?
Yes, so we have customers from all walks of life. I kind of put them into broad categories. You know, we have a number of customers in the financial services space. So typically organizations like wealth managers or financial planners or those kind of organizations where there's actually a regulatory requirement to protect, and actually in some states the term is in the legislation, encrypt client communication. So we provide a very simple, easy to use way to comply with those regulatory demands and, you know, protect the privacy of the exchange. We're seeing a lot of interest in the biotech space, and more around, again, a little bit of regulatory about how to protect client patient data, particularly for those customers who are running some kind of trial or clinical trial. But increasingly in that space, we're seeing people worried about the intellectual property. They have to exchange it with their patent attorney and other people like that. But again, they're worried that, you know, this is really important stuff in terms of their business. And again, they're not really worried about the guy in the data center, but they're more worried about state-based, you know, attacks. So, you know, I don't really want to pick on the Chinese particularly, but, you know, you imagine if you're a startup biotech company with some promising discoveries, the last thing you want to do is to have somebody in China or India or some other place like that get hold of your formulas, your, you know, the mechanics of how to make this stuff, and start, you know, making it in competition in a jurisdiction that has low intellectual property. So increasingly people are looking to protect that. And again, back to the original premise, you know, you have to share information in business. You can't just live in a silo. And it's about how you share that information and maintain privacy.
Yeah, I was talking to someone just earlier today. We had a story that went up on the website. I think it was a healthcare breach. But basically the premise was, I think they just emailed it to the wrong person. But one of our data analysts was just basically saying that, you know, it seems like every week you see a breach like that where someone emails something to the wrong person. Is that something that maybe a solution like yours could kind of help prevent? Because it seems like there's so many, like, human error. Is that kind of what
you know, humans are so creative when it comes to messing stuff up. I don't think you can ever avoid the human error, but certainly there are some things you can do. This happens to me all the time. I'm on a I won't name them, but one of the carriers here in Australia. We were reselling their product some time back, and I'm still in their Active Directory list, and I still get emails directed to me that are destined for somebody else inside the company. You know. And I've told them, and they've gone, yeah, we'll fix it, but I still get the emails. So in things like, you know, Outlook, because they make it easy for you to do, someone just types in Peter Long, and it comes up, and they go, yeah, send, bam, and it's the wrong one. I think, you know, what we're doing is basically making it relatively straightforward to be quite clear about who you're exchanging information with. You know, the names are clearly visible. There's a description about the shared resource that you're using. We call them ARKs or boxes. They're kind of a safe place where people can come together and exchange information. You know who else is in the ARK? The ARK has a name. You know, it's kind of an explicit publish model where you're going to go, I'm going to take this document and share it. So to some degree, you know, the model we've chosen is one of, you know, explicit behavior. I want to share this. I do something specific to share it. So we pretty much don't have that kind of issue where people are just kind of mailing stuff to the wrong people. The other thing that we do, which is kind of, again, unlike email, is you've probably got email from people who've tried to retract an email. And again, Outlook kind of provides this service where you can kind of go, whoops, I shouldn't have sent that email. It's bogus, right? And people read the original email anyway. We can actually take back the document, take back the keys that encrypt the document before someone's read it. So even if you accidentally shared it, you can tell whether they've read it or not, and if they haven't read it, you can pull it back. So I think, you know, in terms of how to solve the user error problem, there's some things you can do, but again, humans are incredibly creative when it comes to messing stuff up.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that's kind of been in the news lately is just a lot of talk about, like, extortion, kind of when it comes to DDoS and things like that. And I was just tweeting about it the other day. I basically just kind of asked if this is kind of going to be the year of extortion, and someone responded, you know, cloud vendors better, you know, buckle up, like, you know, it's really going to affect them. So I'm wondering if you if you guys, like, as a company, kind of follow those trends and kind of have any concerns, in terms of when, DDoS is getting so bigger or different kind of attacks like that?
I think everybody's got to be concerned about, those kind of attacks, DDoS, extortion, whatever. Again, the approach we've taken, I think, helps minimize the impact that would have on our design. And again, getting back to why we're different, if you look at the majority of people in the file sharing space, they tend to have a very centralized model. It's like you send them the file, they store it somewhere, and then they kind of send it back to you or send it on to the people you're sharing with. You look at any of the guys who are big in the space, Box, Dropbox, any of these guys, you send them the file, they look after it. So to some degree, they're a natural attractant to the bad guys because there is one place where you can go get everything. You can go get all the files, you can go get all the usernames, you can go get everything. So their challenge is to protect that. And the bigger they get, the more juicy a target they look, the more effort they've got to spend on defending it. And as we've seen with people like Target, it just takes one slip and the defenses are down. Dropbox has had a number of publicized incidents where you didn't need a password to log in and other stuff like that, where humans make mistakes, and with a centralized model, someone drops the drawbridge on the castle and the vandals come in. The approach we've taken is a completely decentralized model, so there isn't really kind of a central place to go attack because everybody's doing it for themselves. Each end user is encrypting and decrypting their own data. Each end user has their own set of keys. So where do you attack? We've kind of completely decentralized it to a greater extent. So while you're never immune from the bad guys, I think architecturally there's some things to do to make you kind of less attractive, and that's really the approach we've taken.
Mm-hmm. Monica out there, she has a question. She wants to know, let me see exactly what it is here. Get it right. She says, what's your opinion on Amazon releasing a mobile device? I guess, does that kind of affect you guys in any way? If sort of a new player besides Google or Apple kind of comes in the market at all?
I love the fact that people are getting, there's more and more options for mobile devices. The devices that are coming out are incredibly capable, and I, for one, believe that if there's another disruptive influence in the marketplace that's making people easier to get their hands on mobile devices, the better. Yeah, it's still a platform for us to go work with, but at least I think the state of the art is such that people have kind of got a fairly common ground in terms of what capabilities exist on these devices. For example, we have it on the Apple iPads. We're doing an Android development at the moment. And again, because we're just taking advantage of the fact that these are essentially general purpose computers, we actually do encryption, decryption on the end device. Another new device player in the market. Excellent. Bring it on.
Yeah. I guess one other question I wanted to ask is, just kind of get maybe your opinion on some trends, kind of generally in terms of cybercrime. There's a lot of stories out there about, I guess, the cyber criminals kind of changing their tactics and, kind of going after different targets. Just wondering if, kind of high-level view, if there's any sort of trends or things that you see for businesses to watch out for.
I think you touched on, a big issue earlier, which was kind of the extortion. Although it's not really the space that we play in, businesses just have to have backed up copies of the stuff that they care about. Because increasingly people are so vulnerable if their main server gets taken out by someone who's trying to extort them. And we're not in the backup space, but boy, if you're not backing your stuff up and providing alternative ways to run your business, then you're really asking for trouble. I think traditionally the bad guys have gone after the big end of town, because that's kind of why do you rob banks? Kind of that's where the money is. But increasingly, I think they've realized that small and medium-sized businesses are actually easier pickings. They've all got ACH set up with their banks. They've got all electronic transfers going on, and their security posture tends to be much lower. So if you go after a nice, juicy kind of SMB-sized business, you can still go grab a couple $100,000 before they even notice it, and the chances are they haven't got the protection in place that a large bank or a large organization would have. So I think increasingly the bad guys are going to go after the less well-protected businesses that in the past thought they were too small to matter. And I think you'll find that they are becoming kind of prime target.
Yeah, one kind of final thought that we sort of do is every month we kind of pick a different sort of area to focus on, and this month just happens to be encryption, so you're kind of a good person to ask this. You mentioned before it's been about a year since, or a little over a year now since Snowden kind of came out, and that's one of the things that he's been basically telling everybody is, encryption still works. It's sort of the answer to everything. So I'm just kind of curious if you're seeing more people adopting encryption, and if you agree with him that it sort of is the answer to a lot of the problems out there.
I think encryption still is the answer, but it's really not well understood concept. The maths behind encryption is pretty rock solid. You take the standard encryption numbers and it's mind-boggling number of keys. Take you longer than the universe has been around to kind of crack them in the mathematical sense. So, the bad guys don't do that anymore. They try and get the keys, right? They try and impersonate you. They try and impersonate the man in the middle. They'll go to somebody who has a centralized architecture where all the keys just happen to be hanging on the hook next to the data center anyway, and attack it. So I think encryption as a technology is still the right answer. The real issue is key management. How do I manage the keys that enable encryption to work? And a lot of people kind of go, oh, I've encrypted my file, but the key management piece is actually the hard problem. If you kind of look under the covers of what we've done, we use standard encryption. There's nothing magic about encryption. The magic is in how we exchange keys, how we make sure only the right people have the right keys, how we make sure the users manage that all themselves without needing a PhD to make it all work. So the holy grail is making encryption easy to use in a way that doesn't kind of lull people into false sense of security. So I guess to answer the question, I agree with him. Encryption is totally the right technology. The challenge is how you manage kind of the next set of issues around key management and people masquerading as providers. A great example is these guys who broke into root certificate servers and started saying, hey, I'm going to issue a certificate that says I'm Microsoft.com and redirect people to bogus websites. The encryption works fine. It's just you've been duped into going to the wrong website. So I think people will become more aware of these issues going forward, but certainly we shouldn't throw encryption out because I think it is the answer.
Yeah, and then final question, you kind of talked about people stealing encryption keys and kind of going around it, things like that. I mean, is there any kind of, I guess, practical tips or advice you could have for people who are sort of worried about that, or is it fairly simple things or difficult things?
I think you don't want to scare people, but in the past, people kind of had this idea of, oh, if the little lock appears on my web browser, then it's safe. I think increasingly people are realizing, well, maybe it's not safe if I've clicked on some other links first and somebody's masquerading. I don't have any good tips just because the landscape's changing so quickly, but I think if you are dealing with things that matter in your life, like banks and other financial transactions, that you got to make sure that it looks like your bank. It really is your bank. There's not anything that weird comes up during the login process. You go, hang on, what's going on here? Call the bank, change your password, because someone might put in a keylogger and change that $1,000 transfer into a $10,000 transfer to some other place. So I think you just got to be kind of vigilant about the things you do on websites that matter, and anything that looks wrong, bail and just reset everything and call the bank and generally try and protect yourself against something going wrong.
Well, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate you taking the time, Peter.
My pleasure, Jeff, and everyone else out there.